What we're going to talk about now is that little bitty race that we run in Atlanta every year on July 4th with you and your closest 59,999 closest friends, called the Peachtree Road Race. It's a 10K. I think it's the 40th year or 42nd year or however many years they've been running it, but they've been running it for a while. And we're going to talk about a few kind of key things to think about before you run the race and possibly going to enhance your race experience. So Greg, how many times have you run Peachtree?
I have run Peachtree maybe a handful of times.
Handful of times, and sometimes
this was
sometimes half of the race because you were an escort.
That is correct.
So Gregory used to escort the elite women runners back when Gregory was elite himself. I guess I've run the Peachtree probably 15 times, maybe 17 times. I've forgotten it, and I've never created any kind of streak. But there's sort of some key elements that I believe would help at the Peachtree. Things such as if you can avoid a hot day, that's ideal. If you can make sure you hydrate beforehand and during, that's also a good idea. And make sure you wake up early and take public transportation. Those are the three key elements that I can think of right off the bat about Peachtree.
Now, how would one go about avoiding the hot day?
Well, you can't.
And if you can't, what do you do?
You hydrate and pray. But I think with Peachtree, it always blows my mind, people from Atlanta that I believe do not run Peachtree very efficiently. And one of the key things is to note is that Peachtree is a net downhill, but it certainly doesn't feel like it when you're running the hills at about halfway on. If Peachtree was run in cool conditions, you'd probably run pretty fast, but because it's usually running so hot, your times have to be kind of adjusted to some degree with the heat. But I think that most people start off too fast at Peachtree because the first mile or two are relatively flat, maybe rolling. And instead of, you might want to get out a little bit aggressive so you don't get trampled to death by the other 59,000 people, but not so aggressive where you're going to run a personal best in the first 5K.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Does the massive crowd contribute to people feeling like they need to catch up, and that's why sometimes people go out too fast?
Perhaps.
Or does it have anything to do?
Well, perhaps, and I think maybe the mob mentality or the crowd mentality kind of swells and takes people going too fast. But even when it opens up and there's an ability to run, without any distraction, which is hard, it still people go out too fast. After 1 or 2 miles, you've got a long downhill all the way to Peachtree Battle, and that downhill also I think helps encourage people. Everybody's feeling good, the excitement's there, and people run so fast in that first 5K, and probably could PR in the first 5K.
So they definitely need to put the brakes on.
They need to relax. Yeah, I believe that's the kiss of death for most people is not being able to relax in that first 5K. And as they surge down the hill to the Peachtree Battle Shopping Center, they feel okay, but they don't realize just how much energy they have spent until they hit the first hill, which is Cardiac Hill, right past, again, Peachtree Battle. The thing, too, about Cardiac Hills, it's kind of 2 steps of a hill. You take your initial uphill part where it'll get close to Benihana's and I think Houston's across the street, and then you have a little brief reprieve, maybe 50 meters of reprieve. And then it kicks up by the hospital, and that's probably the hardest section as it goes up the hospital. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch is Cardiac Hill. And if you're not ready for that, I think that's kind of surprising to some people. After you do crest the hill, then you've got a flat section, which again lulls people to some degree into thinking the hills are done, but they're not done. And I don't know if you've had experience with that section in your Peachtree time.
No, I see a lot of people walking around that area, but
right, at a necessity.
Yeah.
Right, not doing the Galloway method per se,
right.
but at a necessity. So after you've crested the Cardiac Hill, you've got the flat section all the way down to Amtrak, and where you cross the interstate, that's where you have your next hill. Essentially, it's not a tough hill, and again, without Cardiac Hill in and of itself, that next hill isn't that difficult. But it does surprise people, so you kind of go up and curve right, and then it flattens again prior to the High Museum, which is where I believe your last difficult part of Peachtree lies waiting on you.
Now, you mentioned hydration.
Yeah.
What about on the course?
I think on the course there's going to be plenty of opportunities for hydration all throughout the course. It's one of the marquee one of the marquee events in the world.
And you do recommend.
I do recommend when you can get to a safe spot to grab hydration. Probably again maybe after cardiac hill, prior to cardiac hill and after cardiac hill would be probably a wise time to take that in. You don't want to be trying to drink that and choke on it as you're going uphill. Is probably a pretty difficult challenge. But back to the course, I think once you've finished the hill past Amtrak and you've got that little bit of reprieve with the high museum hill waiting on you, that's really your last difficult effort, in my opinion. As you gradually ease up a hill, again, it would be a completely unformidable hill without the heat and the miles you've done before you. But it does also surprise people as you gradually creep up past the high museum. That's a lot of crowd support's there. I think they call that the Olympic Mile, I believe. So there's a lot of good crowd support. It's a lot of fun, but it is not easy if you're not feeling well. After you crest that hill, you're in good shape because then you're relatively flat all the way down to 10th Street. The last thing that I would recommend is once you get to 10th Street and you make that left-hand turn on the current course, you have 1,000 meters to the finish. That's 2.5 times around a track, and that's a long way to make your final push if you're feeling good and you want to try to run a personal best. I recommend relaxing there too because you've got a long way to go. Even when you cross Piedmont, you have between 400 and 500 meters to run. So again, that's one lap on a track that you have left to run. So my recommendation would be when you turn left on 10th Street, just try to relax. I think the cameras are there. It looks like a false finish. I know that I saw the finish at Piedmont and thought they shortened the course and was super happy because I was going to be finished, but it's a false finish because it's actually the cameras. And so look good, tighten up your form, put your chest out, look strong. But you need to know you've got 1,000 meters to go. So I think you could kind of gradually make your surge all the way to the finish. But again, when you cross Piedmont, you have 400 to 500 meters to go. So just make sure even then that you've got something left in the tank. And there's cameras everywhere, so you got to look good in the last 400 meters.
So the takeaway is probably not to go out too fast and
wait on those hills.
Wait on the hills.
And then take a left on 10th Street and be hydrated prior to and during. Absolutely.